Welcome to another episode of Ungraded, Mahindra University School of Digital Media and Communications flagship YouTube broadcast. And today we are happy to be joined by Dr. Arne Hintz, a reader at Cardiff University in Wales in the UK. And we have a very interesting talk or a discourse or dialogue between me and him, because we'll be talking about something that's cutting edge and contemporary, both in the digital as well as the humanities side of things. So, Arne, welcome to Mahindra University, and thanks for being with us. You've earned your PhD in political science from Hamburg, and your international political economy MA from Warwick in the UK, and then you've been since 2019 been at Cardiff as reader, and you also run as the director of the Data Justice Lab. So I would be so interested to learn what this Data Justice Lab does. Is there justice in data? That kind of thing. So would you please do us the honors?
Yes, thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for being here. Sure. It's very interesting to be at this university and also to have the chance to talk with you here. Yes, data justice and the lab. And is there justice in data? That's a big question that also made us.
It almost sounds oxymoronic now, right?
Yes, I mean, it started with an earlier research project that some of us did at Cardiff. So in my current role, I'm there, as you said, since 2019. I joined the university actually in 2012, a few years earlier. And then we had a project, a multi-year project with some partners also from other universities about surveillance society, digital citizenship, and what are the implications of pervasive digital and online surveillance. And that was the time after the Snowden leaks, and when was it, 2013, when the topic of surveillance and internet surveillance was high on the agenda. And we had a research project.
Edward Snowden, yeah. So that was the big Arab Spring moment for data
in a
justice.
way, yes. And so we researched on surveillance, and we quickly realized, of course, as people did then, that it's not just about specific forms of surveillance, but data collection is now pervasive, is everywhere. Data analysis is an increasing part of how things are run, both in the state, but also, of course, in private businesses, and the data collection, data analysis by platforms and by other commercial actors, and in digital economy has been discussed quite a lot. And so we then thought, well, we're talking really about an increasingly datafied society where we are in the UK, but also beyond that in other places. Other scholars talked about different and wrote about, or not different, but very similar areas. And there was an emerging research agenda of critical data studies at that time, which has emerged since then, to look at the implications of this datafication on various areas of society. And then we were very interested in that, but then also particularly in implications for various areas of social justice. What are the linkages, the relations between the datafication of society and data collection, data analysis, and social justice? Because then you realize, of course, that a lot of data is collected by everyone and used for different areas and private, but also public services. But it's not collected about everyone in the same way. It's not used about everyone in the same way. And
is there consent?
Yes, and these questions, exactly. And some people have more opportunities to kind of get out of certain areas of data collection or to intervene into that more than others. And so these are questions that were interested to us. And so we created this lab, when was it, in 2017, I think, as some kind of a it wasn't a major research center at the beginning, but it was just a grassroots initiative by people working at Cardiff University at the School of Journalism, Media and Culture, to bring these and to advance these research agendas. And then it has grown from there, and now actually over the past few years it has become it has grown beyond Cardiff University, because some of the people who directed it and started it moved to other universities or even to other countries, and now it's more of a virtual lab.
That's very encouraging for us in India, because we are also as concerned, especially at scholarly levels, and these intellectual discourses are starting to open up on governance per se in the age of AI and datafication. See how I segued there into AI? So that's what we're going to talk about next, because you also talk a lot about something called participatory artificial intelligence. And I would really like you to unpack that for us. It's been doing the rounds a little bit in the policy circles, but we don't know what that is. Certainly we don't in this country, because we need to unpack it, it looks like to me, and I would like you to do that, in terms of what do we mean by participation, because there's digital labor on the one hand, which is one form of participation, but on the other hand, that's not what you're talking about, is it? So.
Yeah, there are many different areas, many different ways in which you can approach this. And of course, there is the whole discussion about participation through the use of digital tools and digital infrastructures, and even through the use of data. There's a whole research and practice area of data activism, for example, which is about also civil society groups and social movements and so on, using data and data systems, data analysis to advance their agendas and their purposes. There are, I think, in terms of participatory AI, and there are probably, I would think mainly, first of all, of two streams, and first one that we haven't looked at so far, and then maybe a second one that we have, and I'll maybe talk a little bit more about that. But one is, of course, you could look at it in terms of the development of the technology. And could there be an involvement, and to what extent, in which way could there be an involvement of user communities, but also of everyone who is affected by AI and by data systems and by automation, to have a say in the development, and what technologies are developed, in what way are they developed. And that is a very interesting debate, and also challenging debate, I think, because the history of the internet is in a way one of, what was it called, permissionless innovation, right? And so there is a reason why, and it has led to many interesting and useful advances and impacts to actually have technologists do their thing and not always ask for permission and these and if we go back to the 1970s and the early developments of internet technology, a lot of that has happened like that, and that's what we benefit from today. But then we're in a different situation, and now we have to think about how do we get people who are affected and who use these technologies to have a say also in the development. Now, the second area that I've been looking at a bit more, and also maybe as part of projects also at the lab, is then the use of data analytics, predictive analytics, and AI in government and in the public sector. For example, for the use for allocating certain public services, deciding about social welfare, who gets it, who not, these kind of things that are now done quite a lot in government. And so the deployment, in a way, the rollout
the applications.
Exactly.
So would you think that the health services, for example, might be using this? And if so, how would you define the role of the participant in that?
Yeah, that's a good example, because On the one hand, because at the same time there have been some advances there in terms of AI use. At the same time, also there have been advances in terms of public participation there. So I think in the health sector, there, in terms of diagnostics, there have been some interesting uses of technology for diagnosing certain forms of cancer and other diseases earlier, or with kind of with perhaps more certainty than humans have been able to, or at least to assist humans in doing that. And at the same time, there have been, at least in the UK, also citizen panels and panels of people who have been affected by this to discuss to what extent this should be used there, and what the problems are, and what also the limitations are, and what the limits should be. There have been, for example, I'm thinking about a citizen jury in Manchester a few years ago, which debated for a few days about that exact topic, and then came up with some suggestions on how it could be used, but also where the restrictions should be. And so that's an interesting example also for how people who are affected by this could have a say in how these technologies are deployed and rolled out and used.
So one of the terms that I think you use is something called democratic innovations that presupposes democracy. And in the age that we live in, where we talk very popularly about something called democratic backsliding, how are these solutions poised to work? Now, for example, on the one hand, your justice lab is developing justice systems at participatory levels. On the other hand, in parallel, those very technologies that you're planning to address are perhaps the reason why there is, at least partly a reason why there is democratic backsliding, because it is the appropriation of those technological tools that might be partly responsible for it. So how do you, so where do we go from there?
No, that's a very good question. There's also a tension at the basis of what we're talking about, absolutely. And in part because our original understanding of data justice goes very much in the direction that you just outlined, which is effectively, some people have called it the decentering of technology, which means what we have seen over the past 10 years or so, and are seeing now very much at the moment, is kind of a focus on technical solutions and technological solutions, and if there are problems with, for example, data systems, then the solutions should be also technological and so on. And we're not really convinced about that. And we think that problems that emerge from the use of data and automation and AI and so on are very often problems that are not technological, but
they're human problems.
They're human problems. They're about the economic context, about the social, political context, about how it is used, for what purposes, who has a say in that, and so on. And so, yes, we are skeptical about that. I mean, decentering technology is very much part of our understanding of data justice, not only focusing on technological solutions. And then you're right. If we are then talking about public involvement in, let's say, the deployment of AI, or in even the development, that might suggest that the technology is there and we just have to manage it somehow. And so yes, but it is, I think, part of the broader arsenal of things that we can do and we can address, and part of the strategies that we can deploy. I mean, one is, of course, to always be clear that technological solutions alone are not what we focus on, but also at the same time then to have public involvement in the deployment, even in the development, is another part of the strategies that we can try to advance in order to have more socially just, more democratic, perhaps, forms of technology.
Yeah. So therefore, is it a solution for democracy itself that if governments are planning or seeming like they're stepping away from democracy so that the deployment of technology, I mean, to be really fair to them and to assume that they're doing all this for a greater purpose. If they are actually planning to do that, but these are the chinks in the armor, so to speak, and then you are trying to give them a solution to get back to democracy through these solutions, because this will help them. This is kind of assuage the whole tension that they might have, or their fears that they might have, that real democracy in that way will not work with this kind of technology. So if I have to surveil my citizens, I have to use like a strong arm. Does your solution then provide a larger solution to government at the political level rather than just at the governance level?
It is certainly embedded in these kinds of conversations, absolutely. So I think one of the problems that we are facing with the increasing use of data collection, analysis, and uses of various forms of AI and whatever we want to call it, and the automation that it implies, right, is that it changes state-citizen relations. It changes the role of the citizen, of the resident. It might be a challenge to democracy as in the role of the citizen, and also kind of having a voice in what is happening in society and steering society. If things are automated, if things are increasingly allocated and done based on mere machines and data collections, that is a democratic problem. And so we're wondering what can be done. Certainly representative democracy is an important part, but it's never really how the entirety of how I would understand democracy. A lot of that democracy also includes civil society debates within civil society, debates by grassroots and in communities, and other forms of participation and involvement that are not that go beyond classic forms of representative democracy. And democratic innovations that you referred to earlier also go in that direction, and use that as a starting point, basically, to see what beyond the classic forms of representative democracy, what else can we do to have people have a say and a voice in how, for example, technology is developed and deployed. And so then scholars and practitioners of democratic innovations came up with these models of citizen juries, citizen assemblies, distributed dialogues, and whatever else. Basically, these models of bringing a certain portion of the public, a small portion of the public together, and discuss key issues of societal relevance and try to propose solutions. And that is one form to complement, I think.
So one last and very quick question, therefore kind of a quick answer, is how can educational systems, for example, or research centers, such as one that we might be formulating right now, help in this process, or also participate in this process, and so that it becomes, you were referring to it earlier, a truly kind of a global thing, because after all, technology seems to be a global process or a product, really.
Yes, I mean, what we can see in this area is that there are interventions, and there is research in different places, and that's very encouraging. And just one specific thing that we've been doing at the Data Justice Lab is to have conferences every few years, a Data Justice Conference, and to bring some of these scholars together and to have conversations about that. And in terms of practical connections, our next Data Justice Conference is this year on the 1st and the 2nd of June. So if anybody happens to be in the UK or Europe at that time and would like to join us for this, that is a fantastic opportunity to continue this discussion. But beyond that, beyond conferences, there are also other possibilities to get in touch. I think what we are trying to do as a research center is to develop ideas and concepts, and to analyze the practices of, for example, participation in AI development and deployment, and then provide tools that might be useful also for decision makers at the government level in this case, and elsewhere.
Dr. Arne Hintz, thank you so much for being on this podcast. Our podcast is called Ungraded, Not for Nothing, and this is a presentation by the School of Digital Media and Communication at Mahindra University. Thank you very much.
Thank you.